look at a 65 Deluxe Reverb. We're going to get under the guts of it. Before we get started, we're going to discharge all the capacitors. This is a little shortened tool I made.
Oh, that's homemade?
Yeah, it's got a 100 ohm resistor taped around it right here.
You know what? Maybe
It'll discharge all your caps without knocking you down. These will hold juice for a long time, so always do this before you work on a tube amp.
how many volts could be stored away in that tuck?
450 volts.
Enough to kill you, basically.
Enough to sure make you want to get loose from it. This pot right here is for setting the bias on your output tubes. On this amp, this runs at minus 35 volts. So we flip it on, plug him back in here. All right. Now, take your multimeter, put it on DC voltage. Okay, you're going to check the center pin on your bias control. Alright, we've got minus 51 volts. This is extremely high for this amp. We're going to turn that down.
How were you able to switch that?
Turn this pot right here.
Oh, okay.
Somebody had cranked this all the way wide open. There we go. 35 volts. Tubes are not running good. I think we got some bad output tubes. When I set the bias where it's supposed to be, they start running red hot. I'm going to hook it up to the scope so we can look at the signal. I've reset the bias to minus 35 volts. And we got a good looking signal coming out now.
How are the output tubes looking?
Well, they're old. You know, I probably ought to set another set in it and see how they look with a new set. Alrighty, let's try some better tubes and see what kind of signal we get.
Tuck, you were saying earlier that those tubes are expensive.
Yeah.
The ones that you're holding?
Yep.
Could we
Take them back to your customer.
could we tell everybody about those tubes, what makes them so special? If you just want to hold
old USA made tubes is all. I don't
Okay.
think they're any better than the new tubes they're making nowadays if you get a good brand. I think it's one of these schemes somebody came up with to sell their old tubes they had left on the shelf, so they got everybody thinking that their old tubes are worth more money. And I mean a lot of money. They charge outrageous price for some of these new old stock parts. Oh yeah,
Well, I hope
much better signal now.
from the output?
Yeah. Yeah, those tubes were about shot. When I set the bias where it's supposed to be, it started glowing red. So it's running into saturation.
You think that was somebody's fix to avoid putting new tubes in it? Was
Yeah.
it, let's just crank that down,
That's what they
and
did.
that way we can get by on these old shitty tubes?
That's what they did.
Yeah,
They turned it down to where they was just barely on,
yeah,
and turn them where they're supposed to run, and
Yeah.
they burn up.
yeah.
These here that I've got in it now are in good shape. The amp will probably sound a lot better now. See how much better the signal looks now?
On the scope?
Yeah. This is showing you where the signal comes in. Right here, where this goes in right here and here. That's this tube turning on. As the signal goes up. The reason it's flattened off there is because I'm running the tube hotter than it'll work.
Okay.
To cut it back to where the tube is working, you get the same amount of gain on the top and the bottom. This is one tube, the bottom half of these, and the other tube turns on right here and does the top half. It's an AB amp. One tube turns on, the other turns off, on, off, like that. So it's a duty cycle. They only work half as much as a Class A amp. On your Class A tube amps, each output tube stays on all the time.
Okay.
That's why they burn up twice as fast. Well, that looks a lot better. These were about shot. I'd say these have probably been in there for years. These old output tubes. Okay. Always check your bias when you put new tubes in. You never know, somebody might have done what they did to this one.
Yeah.
Turned the bias way out of spec. You want to get within a volt or two, positive or negative.
What are the repercussions if you crank it like the person did?
Well, if you turn the bias up too hot, the tubes will run hot and they'll burn up very fast. If you turn them down a little bit too cool, the amps start sounding real thin and just don't have any tone quality. So there's a little area in there where you want to get it where it sounds good and the tubes last a long time. This is supposed to set at minus 35 volts. I've got it about minus 36 and a half, so it'll sound a little better and the tubes will still last a long time. These caps here are your tone capacitors. All they basically do is they send part of the signal for your bass and your treble to ground. So when you turn the treble and the bass wide open, it's actually not doing anything. It's sending the whole signal through. And when you back them off toward ground, the pot, it starts sucking out either the highs or the lows, whichever one you cut back.
Okay.
That's how these old amps worked. You've got for this amp here, you've got a .047 for the bass, .022, and a 250 picofarad for the treble. Same thing for this channel here. Right here's the ones for this channel, and this is the ones for the first channel. You short over what the ground you don't want by backing it off on the treble or the bass. These old amps here didn't have a mid. They've got a mid cap that's soldered in right here on your volume pot. Now these sound real trebly. If you want to unsolder this pot right here, take that cap out, it'll make these amps sound a little warmer, not so trebly. That's how I usually do on my amp, but since this is customers, we're going to leave it stock. This channel here doesn't have that cap on it. It's a treble bleed cap. That's about all you need to check on one of these. Check all your tubes, of course. Replace the ones that are bad. Set your bias. Clean all your pots. If you have any kind of hum, you want to check these caps on the bottom with a cap meter and check and see if they're leaking. I always like to replace them, period. You know, they're not that much money, and you're going to have a lot better sounding amp if you just put new ones in it.
Yeah, that seems like one of those parts where if you're in here, well,
especially if
don't put it back together without
that's
changing
original
them.
Caps that's in this.
Yeah,
they've been in here since 1965. So chances are about half of them is going to be bad. Okay, I guess we can plug into it now and see if it sounds any different.
Thank you.